book friends that think good.
What does this mean for our life, for our world? Yiggity yeet, my dude. I'm happy to speak. Always happy to think.
I don't know how to do that. I can look into that.
Makes you sound like a book friend that can think good.
It's Jack and it's Weston.
BFTTGs. Yeah.
Jack, I think good. Sometimes I good think, too.
Makes you sound pretty good.
We might want to make it more concise. We are going to attempt to grapple and answer 3 questions. Number 1, what did we learn? Number 2, what did we disagree with? And number 3, what are we going to do about it? I am ready to roll.
I'm in it. Weston, my book friend, tell me, what book is it that we're thinking good about today?
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bringing funk to this generation. BFTTG.
Today, we're talking about Chapter 18, The Truth About Talent, when genes matter and when they don't.
Genes with a G.
Go ahead, give us the rundown, Jack.
He opens with the example of Michael Phelps versus, and I'm going to just terribly mispronounce Hickam El Goroj. Michael Phelps, amazing swimmer. Hickam, who is an amazing mid-distance runner. Both medalists in the same regard. One is 5'6". One is 6'4" with broad shoulders. One weighs 138 pounds. One weighs 194 pounds. And they have the same size inseam on their pants.
Hey, he's 5'9". Give him those 3 inches. He's 5'9".
Oh, 5'9". Sorry. Yeah. But the thing is, like, basically what he's saying is, had Phelps and him switched places, one of them would be neither of them would have reached the pinnacle of success that they reached. The secret was they picked the right field of competition for their genetics. He makes the example. The thing about this is, like, this could be controversial, but what he's saying is, like, this isn't, like, biological determinism is too simple. It's not to say that, like, your genes, determine your destiny. Rather, what he says is genes do not determine your destiny. They determine your areas of opportunity. And then he gives a couple of examples of how that can be applied in life in this chapter. It's a very interesting chapter. I had a lot of thoughts about it, but I'll let you start. Weston, my book friend, what'd you learn?
So we went through the example. I didn't really have any notes on it. I didn't have any learnings from it because I've, kind of heard very similar things to this before a lot. So I actually didn't. I wanted to start on page 220 where he talks about the personality traits. Did you have anything significant you wanted to talk about after the examples of the athletes and their genetic limitations?
I just want to highlight 2 quotes that I think are really important. 3 quotes, actually. One is, the secret to maximizing your odds of success is to choose the right field of competition. That was his point with Phelps and Hickam. And then the first star I have in my notes is, embracing this strategy requires the acceptance of the simple truth people are born with different abilities. I think that this is something that, I think about a lot. And it's just, it's an uncomfortable thing that I feel like our society really, like, pushes against, which is that, like, everybody has the same potential or same abilities. And that's just not true. Like, people have differing abilities, right? And that's actually a very good thing. Like, that's part of diversity, is that people have different abilities and bring different things to the table because they are different. Like, humans are not made from the same mold. They have, like, similar characteristics, but there's differences that are very important. And the second quote that I think is really important is that competence is highly dependent on context.
Yeah.
I think that is a really, really good thing to reflect on. But then, another finding for me, or, like, learning, is on the same thing with 220. He says your personality is the set of characteristics that's consistent from situation to situation, which I thought was a good definition of personality. But what was your finding there? What did you think was worth highlighting?
Actually, before we do that, I do want to push back a little bit to his idea there about you have to find it. I guess I would just say, maybe this is just semantic, but, like, going along with your environment. You're a product of your environment. I don't think that Michael Phelps necessarily chose swimming over everything else. I think he might have been pushed into that setting early on, and then he was given a positive feedback loop externally when he was a younger kid. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I get a lot of praise for doing swimming. Like, I guess to say that he's the only 6'4" athlete with the same leg length and torso length, or like he's unique in that way, I don't think that's true. I think he was the one that was just in a unique environment that then valued that then he then luckily had the traits that helped him succeed in that. It's not like he was the only, it's not like he chose it because there were so many things that happened before he had to actively choose it,
Yeah.
So that would be
Well,
my pushback.
yeah, I mean, I think a good example is James Clear himself, who like
Yeah.
chose
Yeah.
baseball, was in baseball. Like may he have been like it sounds like he has the ability and capacity to be a professional athlete just with the organization that he has in his life and stuff. But there's some genetic component that's not there or something that it wasn't the right field of competition. And that's just like where he ended up maybe. Or like that's just as far as he could go. And I think that's something to recognize with Michael Phelps. Like had he not had people pushing him into swimming or like encouraging swimming, like he may have found basketball or tennis and like done fairly well there, like probably collegiate level because he's just got that athlete's, mindset, drive, ability that was cultivated over time. But, mid-distance running was never the thing. Like that would never be the thing that would necessarily work for what he is. And I think that might be an important caveat is like, it's sometimes easier to identify the things that are not the thing than the thing that is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah. And time, dude. Time. Like, I think I could have played college sports if I was born 30 years before I was.
Oh, right.
You know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
but I don't know. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Anyways, so back to the personality on page 220. I just wanted to summarize the 5 traits. So these are the most proven scientific analysis of personality traits. They're known as the Big Five, which breaks our behaviors down into 5 spectrums. Number 1, openness to experience, from curious and inventive on one end of the scale of the spectrum to cautious and consistent on the other. So that's a spectrum we can be on. Number 2, conscientiousness, which is organized and efficient on one side or easygoing and spontaneous on the other. The third one is extroversion, outgoing and energetic, to solitary and reserved. Might have also heard this as extroverts versus introverts. Number 4, agreeableness, being friendly and compassionate, to being challenging and detached. And number 5, neuroticism, being anxious and sensitive, to confident, calm, and stable. So I felt like it was important for us to summarize those and think about those when we're thinking about how these genes might impact those sorts of personality traits that we have. And yeah, I agree with all of them. I don't know. I thought it might be fun too. Where do you think you are? What side of the spectrum do you think you are on these 5?
On these 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very high on openness to experience. I'm
Well,
very high on,
it's not high.
yeah, like I'm very much,
I don't think it's a scale of 0 to 100.
Yeah.
I think it's sideways.
yeah,
So do you think
it's
you're more curious
lateral,
and inventive or cautious
Yeah.
and consistent?
more curious and inventive, I think. Yeah.
I think I'm
I
like
think,
right in the middle on that one. I think
yeah,
I stretch into both sides. What about conscientiousness?
conscientiousness, I think I'm in the middle. I think that's one where I pull more to the center.
That one I'm definitely more organized and efficient. That's where I'm more on that side.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this adaptive ability, but I also have this, natural organization and like perfectionism drive in some ways. So I think I strike a middle with conscientiousness.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. Extroversion, outgoing and energetic versus solitary and reserved. Like I'm very much on that outgoing, energetic side, I think.
Yeah, I think I lean solitary and reserved, but I can be outgoing and energetic in the right context. But like
Yeah.
it's not easy for me to be that way.
Yeah. And then agreeableness. I would say this is probably where you and I differ the most. I think I'm very strongly on the friendly and compassionate and you skew towards challenging and detached, but
Yeah,
what
I
do
would
you think?
say no. I would say I skew towards that side too. But it's like,
Yeah.
but again, same thing. I'm very friendly and compassionate in the right context,
Yeah.
but there's like a limit for me. There's
Yeah. Well, and
definitely like
it's
a hard limit for me
like,
to do that. Whereas like
it's not to
you're
say,
much better at being that way with strangers.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Nobody is like all of these things. Like all of these traits exist to everybody.
yeah,
So like there are times when I'm challenging, but if I am, it's usually going to be in a friendly, compassionate manner, you know,
yeah.
which is like, it's a skill to be challenging in a detached manner. Really, like that's an ability that you have that I lack in some respects.
Well, I
Where
think
like,
that's part of what makes me a good teacher too.
yeah,
Is I will challenge the kids and I will detach and I will be like no, I'm not going to help you do it. Like
yeah,
because that's where that's the the kids will just um,
do this
they'll
for me.
yeah they'll attach yeah oh
Yeah.
yeah dude oh
Hmm.
yeah dude they will just
Hmm.
constantly if you do something for them they will not learn how to do it.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's where it's a strength for me in my profession. Okay, neuroticism, anxious and sensitive to confident, calm, and stable. This one, dude, I don't know where to put myself. I feel like I fluctuate a lot on this depending on
Mhm.
context. What about you?
I think I skew towards confident, calm, and stable, um, pretty strongly. I think I'm rarely anxious, um, though
Okay.
I can be sensitive to things. I think that this is something that has developed over time in me. This is like the element of my personality of all of these five. I think that neuroticism is the thing that I've gotten a handle on later in life.
Mm.
Like I think
Yeah.
if you asked me when I was a teenager, I would say anxious and sensitive, but that had a lot to do with environment
Yeah.
and not with personality.
Yeah, I would
Um,
agree with that. That's probably the one that I feel like is the most malleable as we get
mhm.
older.
Well, I think the other thing too is like this is an area where I think our society is neurotic.
Yeah.
Like our society is full of neuroticism. Like there's tons to worry about, and people are very quick to point out things to worry about
It is
rather than
interesting
things to
though.
be calm about.
It is interesting looking at these five traits and thinking about how on one side of the spectrum for all these is youth
Mm,
in a large regard, and on
mm,
one side is um, age,
mm.
experience. You know,
Yeah,
openness
wisdom
to
is another
experience
way.
when you're young, you're super open because you haven't had any experiences, right?
That's right.
When you're young, it's easier to be easygoing and spontaneous because you don't even know how you should organize or how you can be efficient, right? You have to like have
Yeah.
experience to get that. Extroversion, I would say that one's probably the least dependent on age.
Mm,
Agreeableness is, I think, the most dependent on past experiences because
possibly. Yeah.
depending on how you grew up, the setting you grew up in, the context you grew up in,
Yeah.
the sorts of family and people that you grew up around, you
Mm,
could be friendly and compassionate because you were
hmm.
allowed to be.
Yeah.
Or if you grew up in a setting where you had to fight to survive,
Yeah.
like it's very easy to be challenging and detached
Yeah.
because you
This
had to be
is
to survive, right?
well, this is where the nature versus nurture
Yeah.
question comes in, which is like I personally am a strong believer of what Clear says. Our habits are not solely determined by our personalities, but there's no doubt our genes nudge us in certain directions. I think
Absolutely.
that that's very true when it comes to personality. Because like I look at my daughter who's 10 months old, and like already she exhibits um, very curious and inventive openness to experience, and very like outgoing and energetic extroversion. Like if there is a sound, I will watch her and she's like, what is that?
Oh yeah.
And I watch her around other kids, and like there'll be like a sound or something or like another kid, and she's like the first one looking, and like other babies will be like just like looking or like maybe turning away or kind of like twiddling with their fingers or something. And I'm like, that's interesting. She's different. Like she just like exhibits traits that are specific to her.
Hmm. Yeah, it's pretty cool how early on you can see like how unique your kid is.
Hmm.
Um, or I don't know. They always seem unique to us. Oh,
Yeah.
mine's so unique. And
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing is like you think that, but then you realize like, oh, all kids do that,
yeah.
especially with your first kid. Um,
Or not
but
maybe I just haven't seen, but there's like a bunch
yeah,
of kids that do that. You know?
Yeah, but those are traits I notice like when other kids are around, I see her acting differently. Like, oh, interesting. She's like snapping to faces much faster than other kids her age. And I think that's not like developmental, though probably like some of it is. I think it's personality. I think it's like, oh, she's just interested.
Yeah.
That's just like a piece of her.
There are definitely natural inclinations for sure.
Yeah. This is where, oh man, I really loved this about personality. He says this, and this was probably like my biggest, like, yes, I'm so glad he said this in this book because this is something I've been waiting for the whole time. He says, you don't have to build the habits everyone tells you to build. Choose the habit that best suits you, not the one that's most popular.
Yeah.
This is so important. And like we talk about, because you hear these things like, oh, early risers, like wake up early. We just talked about that the last time that we spoke. Like, not everybody's suited
that was
for
not
that.
my natural inclination. I want to point
Yeah.
that out. I had to
Yeah.
work to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah. And your reasons for doing it are very different. And like, you chose it because it suited you. And that works. But like, yeah, the thing is like, you don't have to do these habits. Like, this is like why crash diets are crash diets.
Mm-hmm.
Because just because someone tells you to do it doesn't mean that's going to work, or that's the best thing for your genes or your personality, or that's the right field of competition for you. Like, really good example for me was when I taught at local university here, like students picked science because that's what society is saying. It's like, oh, the future is in STEM. The future is in STEM. I had so many students though that I was like, I would see them in my office and I'd be like, look, you should not be in STEM. And that's not a dig on you. You should be in, political science, or you should be in English. Like you're not
Or not in college.
Yeah, or not in college. Right?
Which is not a bad thing. We need to
Yeah.
value blue collar work more.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking more about students who think differently than about ability. But
No,
there
but
were some students that like the ability wasn't there. And it's like, go like,
Dude, it's not even ability for me. It's a different ability. There are students, there
Exactly.
are people that
That's
have
what I-
much better hand skills and
Yeah.
like spatial, like I think about plumbers and like welders all the time about like how they I have
Totally.
no idea. I have no
I-
idea
and
how you
that's-
can I can't do that stuff. Like we just
Yeah.
talked about a few weeks ago, we had the master bath done. And I
Yeah.
was like going through some things with my father-in-law because he is a construction worker. So he has fantastic like spatial awareness and that sort of skill. And
Yeah.
dude, he does things that are just so amazing to me. And I'm just like, I have
Yeah.
no idea how you did that.
that's so important because that's not what I mean. I just mean that like intellectual ability, that ability to like they talk about iron butt, right? Sit in a seat and read. Like that's not for everyone.
Right.
And that isn't a specific ability and it needs to be treated as such. Like that's not intelligence. It's not like you're a better person. That's just like you have the ability of study where someone else has the ability of some other thing,
I
right?
got
Like,
another hot take for you.
okay. What is it?
That's also why women in general and little girls do better in school.
Hot take, bro. But that's because it's the way it's been set up. Boys need more movement in general. There are definitely
okay.
girls that fit on that side, right? But like just overall, like by and large, little boys need more movement. They need bigger things to do. Girls are much better with their fine motor skills.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think
mean-
some of that is like a vestige of the past with societal stuff. But I also think there's a reason that that's been. I mean, look at all the different cultures around the world. Who's the one that's out hunting and fishing? It's usually the guys, right? Because they're better at those gross motor skills, the bigger movements. Who's the one like
interesting.
making the things at home and doing like the basket weaving or the sewing, things like that? That's because women are much better with the fine motor skills. Again,
Wow.
in general, or at least at the beginning,
Yeah.
like naturally, right? Guys
Yeah.
can develop it, girls can develop the other way too.
Yeah.
But like that's a reason why school, the way it's set up, little girls and women tend to do better. I mean, when you look at our universities now, I think it's like something like 62 or 63% are women now.
Yeah.
Like guys are learning that it's like, dude, I can't handle this.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
well, and that's, I mean, that's fine to some respect too. Like these societal ideas that we come up with, like the glass ceiling, right? And like prevention of like knowing that about fine motor skills or considering that as like it is a shame that we barred women from participation in things like surgery, dentistry.
Oh,
Like
dude,
they
yeah.
have those abilities like that
Oh, yeah.
were like just squashed because of societal things for hundreds of years. And it's just, I don't know, just ridiculous.
Yeah, everyone should have equal opportunity to do anything that they want to do.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just speaking like by and large, now that I've worked with hundreds of students,
Hmm.
I've seen that biology is stronger than I initially thought when I got
Yeah.
into this field.
It it is. And I think that that is this is where Clear's idea gets interesting. And this is the thing that I wanted to talk about probably the most in this chapter is like the explore exploit trade-off.
Yes,
Picking the
that was my
right
next point.
habits, pick the right habit and progress is easy. Pick the wrong habit and life is a struggle. So he basically urges in this chapter, like the summary statement at the very end is work hard on the things that come easy. And I think that like, I have heard the opposite of that narrative my entire life. Like, oh, if you're comfortable, like get uncomfortable, like, embrace the suck, right? All of that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
do the hard thing first. Like that is the opposite of what Clear is advocating for. He's saying like, find the things that are easy for you. And he gives criteria for doing that I think are really good. I wanted to highlight his 4 questions from 224 and 225.
Before we get to that, because
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about those too as well.
Yeah.
On 223, there was the thing I wanted to talk a little bit about what you were talking about or what you mentioned, the explore when losing, exploit when winning.
Yeah.
The first example that came to mind for me was using that to becoming a semi-decent competitive Pokemon player, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to explore different teams, combos, moves, things like that. And when you find one that starts actually working, like that's when I definitely kept like exploiting it. I was like, I'm going to use this and just see like how far I can take it and see what
Sure.
breaks it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you lose in that sort of feedback loop, you can
Mm-hmm.
either explore or like I guess specific to Pokemon, you could explore within the team, different moves,
Mm-hmm.
different abilities, different items, or you can explore out of the team by putting new Pokemon in, a whole new team set of Pokemon. And I think that was a really good analogy for like how we should approach these
Yeah.
sorts of things. So instead of like, I guess I didn't love the word exploit, but it's true. If you're winning at something, if you're doing something and it's working, keep doing it until you find out, until you learn what causes it to lose or what breaks it down. There's
Yeah.
always a
Totally.
counter for a counter in life. Like,
Yeah.
so I just thought it was important for us to point that out. That I really like that. Like,
Yeah.
you need to explore,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a good message too in terms of like don't be a sore loser. Like this is why I've talked throughout this book about how I want and I try and put my students in situations where they're going to lose because I think it's important for us to learn how to be a good loser, how to learn from losing rather than just how to be like, I lost, I'm never going to do that again. Meh. Like how do you approach it? How do you learn from it rather than learn again, kind of like what we were talking about last chapter. Don't take the negative consequences, the loss, as just cutting it out. Like learn from it, do something
Yeah.
different from it, and grow from it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
That's so good. Like I had, going back to my students when I was teaching college, like I had so many of them in my office who were struggling or for whatever reason, but I knew like there were some students where I realized like you should just not be here. Maybe you need to go to community college for a couple of years, figure out what you like, and if this is for you, and do that. But there were some students who I had where it was like, you're, clearly like studious and like, all this kind of stuff, but like this is not clicking. Where is it clicking? And so often I heard students say things like, oh, well, I really like philosophy or I really like ethics or something like this, but this is where the jobs are. And my encouragement was always like, maybe you need to do a little bit more exploring and think about like, what could you do with an ethics degree? Like the problem is like growing up, you see 4 jobs. You see firefighters, you see doctors, you see teachers,
see
and then
dinosaurs.
whatever your parents do, right? Like those are the jobs, right? So when you get to a place where it's like, well, I don't, all I know that I can do something with is a science degree because doctors make money. Like that's an opportunity to explore and exploit.
Could that be the wrong measure?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
All right,
Yep.
let's dive into these 4 questions because I definitely have some notes here as well. So
Yeah.
on page 224, James Clear gets into 4 questions that you can ask yourself to continually narrow in on the habits and areas that will be most satisfying to you. So he's like, if you're struggling, if you're, exploring, ask yourself these 4 questions.
Yes. I love these questions.
Ooh, ooh, all right. I
I
will
love
get
them.
ready then. I will get ready.
Yeah. Here they are. What feels like fun to you, but work to others? You can handle the pain of the task easier than most. 2, what makes me lose track of time? Where do you feel in the zone? 3, where do I get greater returns than the average person? What comes quickly to you? 4, what comes naturally to me? No internal judgments or people pleasing. Whenever you feel authentic and genuine, you're headed in the right direction. Okay, Weston, what's your pushback here?
Well, I just wanted to go through one by one, actually. So the first question, what feels like fun to me to work to others? I think that a lot of this comes down to growth mindset rather than not necessarily a natural proclivity to things, but like we just talked about, having a growth mindset. How can I learn from this? How can I grow from this failure or loss? So I agree it's a good question to ask, but I also think you need to have the right mindset about these sorts of things so that you don't. And it's important to have that right mindset or the growth mindset so that you don't miss out on something you could have really enjoyed if you gave it an honest chance.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the first question?
Feels like fun to me, but work to others. This is a good thing to just keep in mind as you do things. This is not necessarily a litmus test for like, you should make this decision when you're 18, or you should make this decision when you're 25, or you should make this decision. Like, this is just something to keep in mind as you go about life.
Yeah.
Like eventually, so like a good example is I'm a homeowner, right? That was a new development in my life. And I quickly had to learn to do things. I upped the game on yard maintenance, started doing house projects. And you start to like recognize these things, and you have to ask the question, like, can I save money here, or do I need to spend money to do a thing with your house, right? And so like one of the things I learned is like, people hate drywalling, but I actually like it. It's like relaxing to me. It's very like meticulous and perfectionistic. And it's like, it's a perfect foil for like my stress, where it's like, it's something where like that stressful like perfectionism is rewarded, but it's not, the stakes are not high. You're just like drywalling a space. So like for me, it's actually a good outlet, and I kind of enjoy doing it. So like if I have to patch some drywall, I don't need to call somebody. I just do it. And that was one of those areas that appeared that was like, well, this is fun to me and it's work to others. So I'm actually better suited to do it than to hire it out. But other things like,
I'm imagining you like in the basement. Your wife comes down. She's like, Jack, what are you doing? And you're like cutting a hole in the wall. And you're just like, I needed to relieve some stress. Don't worry, I'm fixing it, okay?
I need to burn this off. Just doing some drywall, hun. Don't worry. Yeah. Yeah. No, but that's a good example for me of this. Is like, it wasn't something I ever could have like sought out. It's just like my life wasn't lined up with that. But as I started going, I started to realize like, this is actually not so bad to me.
Yeah. Example for me would be like curriculum design, lesson planning, experience design.
Yeah, which is something you didn't realize before you became a teacher. Like as you get into it and you're with your teammates, you realize like, whoa, people hate this. I love this.
Yeah. Yeah. Second question, what makes me lose track of time? My note was flow states are awesome. That is all.
This is so losing track of time. This is, sometimes people ask me the question like, well, Jack, what do you think heaven is like? This is it to me. Like
eternal flow state, dude.
Eternal life, like not being ruled by the clock. Like I encourage people to push into this. Like,
oh yeah.
Where do you lose track of time? Like that's something to follow in life.
Yeah.
And like really pay attention to like, oh man, I lost track of time doing this. And it's like, dude, then that's close to heavenly living. Like that's an experience of eternity.
I've never thought about that. That's a dope idea.
Yeah. So it's something that I really encourage people to search for and to relish. Like, yeah, if you lose track of time doing something, do that more. Like, find that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Third question. Where do I get greater returns than the average person? This is the one. This is the one that I disagreed with.
okay.
I said this is the wrong measure.
Hmm.
Comparison hardly ever leads to virtuous people. I think this is very achievement focused, like we've talked about, and in my opinion, that is a bad focus. Like, yeah, it's just why are you comparing yourself to others, and how are you even going to tell if you're getting better returns than the average person? It's a bad
Yeah.
measure. You
Who is
can't do
average?
it. Who's average?
Who's
What is the
average? That's the
average
question.
amount? Like, it's
Yeah.
just
What's an average return?
yeah. Again,
Like,
maybe
that's so
maybe it's
hard to
because the book is so
judge.
business focused, or like he's kind of speaking to a
Yeah.
business audience where they have more metrics like that. But
Yeah.
like you've spoken about, there's a lot of bad metrics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bad metrics in the business world. So I just
Totally.
think that one's like, I think we can just toss that one out. But
Hmm.
anyways, what about you?
Yeah. It is worth looking at though. Like maybe the question to say is like, what am I like, where do I find that I, uh, like I'm having a hard time like rephrasing it, but there is something to look at here, which is like, man, other people really struggle to do this, but I just like can do it.
But I think
And
that's
maybe,
answered in the first two questions. That's why I feel like
yeah,
it's just
and
unnecessary.
it's also answered by the fourth question. What
Yeah,
comes naturally to me?
exactly.
Which is really just like the question of like, you know, every like kids in school get this all the time. Like there are kids who like things because they enjoy them, and there are kids who like things because they're good at them.
Hmm.
Like I was a kid who didn't necessarily like math, but I was good at math, right? So like when people ask me what your favorite subjects are in school, math never made the cut because it
Hmm.
wasn't a favorite. But I did recognize in myself like, yeah, but I'm good at math. I can do math.
Yeah.
And I know that it's hard for other people. So I kind of keep my mouth shut about math.
Dude, that's
Like I don't
actually
complain.
pretty similar to how I felt too growing up. Where it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't love it. I can do it. I
Yeah.
don't love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But I quickly realized like, I realized as I grew, like, oh, people really don't like this. Um, and so, you know, I'd take the opportunity especially as I got older and started to like care more about other people and like develop empathy, start to realize like maybe I can help people with this. Or like I took a math tutoring uh, job when I was in college. You and I both did.
yeah, I was gonna say, I
And
think we worked at the same place, right?
yeah, yeah, mathnasium.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was just like one of those things where it's like, well, this makes sense because I'm just good at this,
Mm,
you know, and it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I want to do this. This is like just something that worked.
yeah. The fourth question. I wanted to read his full paragraph on it.
Okay.
So, what comes naturally to me? For just a moment, ignore what you have been taught. Ignore what society has told you. Ignore what others expect of you. Look inside yourself and ask, what feels natural to me? When have I felt alive? When have I felt like the real me? No internal judgments or people pleasing. No second guessing or self-criticism. Just feelings of engagement and enjoyment. Whenever you feel authentic and genuine, you are headed in the right direction. That is where I think these questions can be summed up, and I think that is probably my favorite paragraph from the book so far. I
Yes.
think that's
I love
exactly
that.
what we need to do.
I love that. And that is such a good, reflective question to ask yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I feel authentic and genuine? Like that is so good to ask. I think that people really struggle with this because they don't get to a place of reflecting on this and they're not encouraged to, right? You're encouraged to think more about where do I get greater returns than the average person than what feels natural to me. Like, and I think this is one of the reasons that people struggle so hard with identity and there's so much anxiety around it is because like our society pushes us to measure the wrong thing. Like we should be looking at engagement, enjoyment. Where are we losing time doing things? Like these are good measures. These are good like litmus tests to say like, oh, this actually fits me really well. And when I talk about things like spiritual gifts with people, these are the kind of questions I ask. Like, oh, well, what feels natural to you? You know, where do you like, what do you think God made you to be? Right? Like that's the kind of thing that people have a really hard time putting a finger on, because everything in our society pushes against us with an opposite narrative.
And I would say I'm a quintessential example of this because I hated school growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I hated
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not, it definitely was not on my list of things that I was like even thinking about in college. Um, until I took a job as a paraeducator,
Mm.
and I had connected all these dots because it was like, oh wow, wait a second. Like in middle school, because I was good at school, just like you were, I had taken a tutoring job, or not taken a tutoring job. I kind of started my own tutoring business, right? So I tutored from like seventh grade through high school. I got that job our freshman year working at Mathnasium. I'd always been coaching kids throughout the time too in different sports. Um, and so I took the job because like, I have a lot of experience with it. I like working with kids or whatever. But it didn't hit me until I worked at that job for like, I don't know, 2 years. And I'd seen the progress of the students that I in particular worked with. That, and I got a lot of positive reinforcement from some amazing teachers there. That this one woman in particular, I hope she's still working in Spokane, and I should reach out to her now that I'm thinking about her again.
Yeah.
She was a fifth grade teacher, and she said to me one day after school as we were planning stuff and going through things, she said, Weston, education needs you more than you need education.
Mm.
And I don't know, it just stuck with me. That line stuck with me, and I have found it to be true. And it's like, it's exactly where I find my flow state. It's exactly where I feel, just like you said, I feel that God put me on this earth to do this. Like
Yes.
this is my thing, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I really like, this brings me to the takeaway from this section. You were actually the first person to bring this up to me. So this isn't a new idea, but the Dilbert problem, Scott Adams, right? Scott Adams, the cartoonist who drew the comic strip Dilbert about workplace antics, right? He was kind of the, like, in my mind, like one of the best to do this, like office place commentary. Dilbert's like dry humor, but basically Scott Adams said about himself, I'm funny, but I'm not the funniest. I'm a decent drawer, but I'm not the best drawer. So what can I do? Humorous comics. He put together two things that he was good at. And in a very narrow field of competition, he rose to the top.
Well, three.
And he added a third thing,
yeah.
his business experience.
Yeah.
So he had funny things to say in a cartoon medium about the business world. And Dilbert has been one of the longest running comic strips. It's enjoyed a lot of success, TV series and stuff. But Scott Adams was like, yeah, I'm kind of average on all of these things, but you put them all together, I'm uniquely positioned to do them. This is what actually got me into game design in the first place. This was your idea. You were like, Jack, you love games. You love the Bible. You know both of those things probably better than most people. But if you put those two things together, you know the Bible in the context of games probably better than anybody I can think of. And it was like, oh, well, that's an interesting niche that is worthwhile to explore.
At the very least, seems fun to you, but maybe not to others, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, like other people are like, why would you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's great. I have a lot to say about a particular quote from the end of page 225 to the start of 226, too, that goes along with this, right after these 4 questions.
Okay.
The quote is, a good player works hard to win the game everyone else is playing. A great player creates a new game that favors their strengths and avoids their weaknesses. This has been my mantra in education.
Yeah.
I didn't get into education. I didn't get into this field to win the current game. I got into this field to change the game. And I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah.
And I recently had the chance to talk with my first group of students, actually at my current school. My first 5th graders, they just graduated high school. I'm an old man now.
Yeah.
Despite it being 8 years ago, those students vividly remembered our team name, our class chant, and our mission statement. Um, and it was honestly one of the coolest experiences that I've ever had, and it's been something that I've been working towards for a long time. I tell my kids constantly. I've been telling them for years now. It's like I don't. Might be sacrilegious to say this as a teacher, but again, I'm trying to change the game. I don't care about their success as fifth graders or sixth graders. I care about them being successful humans, and I tell them that a lot. And so with that context, I'm able to give more feedback because they know I'm not so focused on the now. And I give them reasons for why. That's why I've been able to build habits with these kids, because I'm telling them why it's a good habit for the future, how it will impact them in the future, in job scenarios, whatever. Anyways, and even one of those students took me aside to ask me about opportunities to come volunteer with me now that he's an adult next year. So I was just like, this is if this is my first year, man, this is going to turn into some cool stuff in the next few years. Yeah. And it was honestly just like super humbling to have that experience, and an incredibly invigorating moment for me too, where especially given the context of the last 3 years with everything that's gone on in the pandemic, it's just like, damn, I made a difference, and I'm still making a difference. And so that being said, again, I told you I'm very passionate about this. I'm going a little tirade here. This is exactly why I get frustrated with so many new teachers. Because while everyone that comes into education, everyone that wants to be a teacher means well and has good intentions, they don't come with the message. They don't come with a vision, or at least the majority of them don't. Right? Yeah. And like I had these vast experiences where I hated school. I was not the kid that wanted to go into teaching. And I had all these experiences in business school, philosophy and theology. I went on a couple, I went to Jamaica on a mission trip with you. I taught in Tanzania for a little bit as a part of my master's. Like I had all these different experiences that gave me a vision. I had a reason. I have something to actually teach the kids. I'm not there just because I'm organized and can help them get through some lessons, some, concepts that someone else designed. I have a vision for them and for their future. Yes. And if you like, please go into education or go into whatever field it is, have a vision, right? We need people who see the higher purpose in every single field. We need people that see the bigger picture and have the higher purpose. But again, for me, I know that teaching answers all 4 of those questions positively for me. Teaching is fun as hell, dude. I love designing lessons and creating memorable experiences and seeing the huge progress for my students. Yeah. I definitely get lost in the lesson design and when talking with students. I definitely at points, I'm that teacher that, like, if they ask the right questions, we might be doing a completely different lesson that day. Because I have that vision, and any teacher that I've known that has a greater vision like this, you have more academic progress, and you get less behavioral issues. I'm the guy that they send all these quote unquote bad kids to. And then, I don't know, I turn them good or whatever. But it's just like you have to have that vision. And you see the good in people. You see the positive. You create those positive habit contracts. You create the positive accountability buddies. And it changes the world for some of these kids. Yeah. I think, like, you were hitting on the concluding point of this chapter, which is, like, there's an old saying that, like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? But, like, good intentions are nothing. Like, they need to be put to action. And the question is, like, are you positioned to put them to action? Are you positioned to, like, strive for those things? And, like, the quote that he says here is, our genes do not eliminate the need for hard work. They clarify it. They tell us what to work hard on. Yep. And I think that that's the thing, is, like, your vision didn't
it wasn't just dropped into your lap. It was something that like developed over time and you turned more into it. Like the idea of community building and education is a unique combination. But when you push into both of those with strength and you push into both of those with hard work, which comes easy to you and is natural, then it bears incredible fruit. I think that that is the thing that needs to be considered in this chapter is like, nobody's telling you don't work hard. Nobody's telling you like, don't do anything. They're telling like what Clear is saying is like, find the things that make sense to put your effort in life behind.
Yeah, it's huge. My actionable piece for this chapter was it kind of helped validate my choice in my profession and inspired me to keep going, keep building. Middle of COVID was really rough, and honestly the first time that I even considered a career change.
Yeah.
But the end of the school year and seeing how this year has gone, I feel reinvigorated.
Yeah.
And having my first group come back was huge for me this week. And just like seeing those, because it wasn't immediate rewards like we talked about with these habits, right? That was a very delayed, huge gratification.
Yeah. And maybe this is the like advice that I would give somebody, because I think that this could be misconstrued too, is like, talks about narrowing the field, like narrowing your categories and like narrowing your focus. And the reality is like, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to do this. Like you don't have to create something new ex nihilo from nothing, right? You don't have to create like your own business. You don't have to create your own consulting firm or like strike out on your own. Sometimes you can take the track that Weston has taken, which is like you go out and you find what's broken and you bring a remedy to it. You know, like you change the game you can change the game from without, create a new game entirely, or you can like change the way the game is played. Like take an example like sports. Sports is a really good example for this.
Like, you can change the game within, and all these sports have evolved over time too.
Sports change, games change, like the rules change, and like you can be a part of that, you know. Like you can be a part of that kind of thing rather than just creating something entirely new. And I think that's an important piece is like, what do you, like, if you go into education, what do you bring to it? If you go into ministry, what do you bring to it that's unique and different and needs to be emphasized? Because I think that if more people viewed things that way, and if as the world starts to see, like, that's where things become interesting, is when you bring a new perspective to something that's very old. Thank you for joining us, book friends. Next week on the BFTTG pod, Jack and Weston, they're thinking good some more with you, our book friends. Check out the show notes or the description, comment section for a link to the book and any articles that we talk about in the show. Bye-bye, book friends.
Bye for this time, guys.
Do a good thing today.
I love you.
Love you too, dude.